There is a moment in every professional's life when money stops feeling mathematical and starts feeling emotional. Early in a career, money appears simple. Income arrives, expenses are paid, savings grow slowly, and financial decisions feel mostly mechanical. Earn more, spend responsibly, invest consistently. The formula feels clear enough, almost predictable, but something changes as responsibility increases. Income rises, careers stabilize, investments begin to matter, families depend on you, long-term commitments appear, mortgages, education planning, retirement accounts, professional reputation. Gradually, money stops representing convenience and begins representing security, and security changes how the mind behaves. What once felt like a tool slowly becomes a psychological shield. Many professionals do not notice this transition happening. On the surface, life looks successful. Income improves. Lifestyle becomes comfortable. Financial literacy increases. Yet internally, a subtle tension begins forming. Decisions feel heavier. Market news creates unease. Career risks feel more dangerous. Opportunities are judged less by potential growth and more by potential loss. Money, which once symbolized possibility, now symbolizes protection. This is the quiet turning point where wealthy thinking and average thinking begin to separate. Because the real difference between financially secure individuals and everyone else is not how they behave when money is growing. It is how they think when money is at risk. Most financial conversations focus on accumulation, earning more, saving more, investing more. These topics dominate books, podcasts, and professional discussions. But wealth is rarely defined during periods of stability. Wealth is defined during uncertainty, economic downturns, career transitions, market volatility, business challenges, unexpected life events. These moments reveal the underlying psychology guiding financial behavior. For many professionals, risk feels like danger. The instinctive response is preservation. Reduce exposure, wait for certainty, protect existing gains. The reaction feels rational, even responsible. Human beings are naturally loss-averse. Psychologically, losing money produces stronger emotional pain than gaining the same amount produces satisfaction. Our brains evolved to prioritize survival, not optimization. But modern financial life operates differently from ancient survival environments. Avoiding every perceived threat no longer guarantees safety. In fact, excessive caution can quietly limit growth. Opportunities rarely arrive with certainty attached. Promotions involve risk. Investments fluctuate before compounding. New roles require discomfort. Entrepreneurship demands incomplete information. Those who avoid uncertainty entirely often avoid advancement as well. Wealthy thinkers understand something that initially feels uncomfortable. Risk cannot be eliminated. It can only be understood and managed. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid loss?" they ask, "What kind of risk am I taking?" Not all risks are equal. Some risks threaten survival. Others threaten only comfort. Confusing the two leads many intelligent professionals to play smaller than their circumstances actually require. Consider two individuals facing the same uncertain environment, a changing industry, volatile markets, or a new opportunity requiring investment of time or capital. One person withdraws, waiting for clarity before acting. The other evaluates probabilities, adjusts exposure thoughtfully, and continues moving forward despite uncertainty. Over time, these small behavioral differences compound. The first prioritizes emotional safety, the second prioritizes long-term positioning. Neither person believes they are acting emotionally, yet both are. Money exposes psychology with unusual clarity. It reveals hidden beliefs about control, identity, and self-worth. When money feels threatened, deeper fears surface. Fear of regression, fear of losing status, fear that progress might not be permanent. For professionals who grew up middle class, these reactions often run deeper than expected. Financial stability represents more than comfort. It represents proof that hard work succeeded. Losing money feels less like a financial event and more like a personal setback. Wealthy individuals gradually learn to separate identity from financial fluctuation. They understand that markets move, industries evolve, and careers change constantly. Temporary losses are interpreted as part of participation rather than evidence of failure. This mental separation allows clearer thinking during instability. Instead of reacting automatically, they reassess strategically. Instead of assuming danger, they evaluate information. Uncertainty becomes expected rather than shocking, and expectation reduces panic. There is also a realization that emerges with experience. Stability itself contains risk. Remaining in familiar environments feels safe, but slow stagnation carries long-term consequences. Inflation erodes purchasing power. Skills become outdated. Industries shift quietly, while comfort encourages inaction. The absence of visible danger does not mean the absence of risk. In many cases, the greatest financial threat is not sudden loss, but gradual complacency. Wealthy thinkers train themselves to recognize invisible risks, the risks of standing still, postponing decisions, and protecting comfort at the expense of growth. They do not chase danger, but they refuse to confuse calmness with safety. And once this shift happens, money begins to feel different. It stops being something to defend emotionally and becomes something to manage intelligently. Because real financial maturity begins the moment risk is no longer feared blindly, but examined carefully. Now we are moving to something that quietly shapes nearly every financial decision people make, yet very few professionals ever examine directly: the way we define risk. Ask most people what financial risk means, and the answers sound predictable. Market crashes, job loss, business failure, losing savings, making the wrong investment. Risk, in common understanding, is associated with loss, but wealthy thinkers operate with a very different definition. For them, risk is not simply the possibility of losing money. Risk is the probability of limiting future options. This distinction changes everything. Many professionals spend their careers trying to eliminate financial uncertainty. They choose stability whenever possible, avoid unpredictable opportunities, and build lives designed to minimize disruption. On the surface, this appears responsible. Stability feels mature, predictability feels intelligent, security feels like success. Yet over long periods of time, the pursuit of absolute safety often creates a hidden vulnerability. Because the modern economy does not reward stillness. Industries evolve. Technology replaces routine work. Skills that were valuable 10 years ago slowly lose relevance. Entire career paths transform without dramatic warning. The professional who optimizes only for safety may unknowingly increase long-term risk. Wealthy individuals understand that risk is not a single event. It exists across time horizons. Short-term risk feels visible and emotional. Long-term risk feels quiet and abstract. Most people have short-term volatility while ignoring long-term stagnation. Consider a stable job that pays well but offers little growth. Each year feels comfortable. Income arrives reliably. Daily stress remains manageable. There is no immediate danger. But over a decade, something subtle happens. Skills stop expanding. Professional leverage declines. Adaptability weakens. Opportunities narrow. The risk was never sudden loss. The risk was gradual irrelevance. Wealthy thinkers learn to evaluate decisions through a broader lens. They ask not only, what could I lose today, but also, what might I lose by staying exactly where I am? This mindset reframes uncertainty. Instead of seeing change as threat, they see it as information about future positioning. They understand that uncertainty often signals environments where growth is still possible. This does not mean wealthy individuals behave recklessly. Quite the opposite. They distinguish carefully between intelligent risk and emotional risk. Emotional risk is driven by impulse, chasing trends, reacting to fear, or making decisions for status validation. Intelligent risk is calculated. It considers downside protection, learning potential, and long-term optionality. The difference lies in intention. Average thinking asks, is this safe? Wealthy thinking asks, is this worth understanding? This subtle shift removes the expectation of certainty. Decisions no longer require perfect information. Progress becomes possible even when outcomes remain unclear. Professionals often struggle here because education and early careers reward correctness. Schools teach students to avoid mistakes. Corporate environments reinforce predictability. Performance reviews favor reliability over experimentation. Over time, many intelligent people internalize the belief that uncertainty equals poor judgment. But financial growth rarely follows guaranteed paths. Investments fluctuate before compounding. Promotions require stepping into unfamiliar responsibility. Entrepreneurship evolves through imperfect decisions. Even career advancement often involves accepting roles before feeling fully prepared. Wealthy thinkers normalize uncertainty rather than resisting it. They expect incomplete information. They recognize that waiting for perfect clarity often means arriving after opportunity has passed. Another important distinction emerges in how risk is emotionally processed. When money feels threatened, many professionals shift into defensive thinking. Decisions become reactive. The goal becomes avoiding regret rather than pursuing progress. But regret avoidance is a powerful limiter. It encourages safe decisions that protect ego rather than build wealth. Wealthy individuals learn to tolerate temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term positioning. They accept that intelligent decisions sometimes produce short-term losses. What matters is whether the decision improves future capability. Risk becomes connected to learning rather than fear. This perspective reduces emotional volatility during uncertain periods. Market downturns become expected cycles rather than personal crises. Career transitions become strategic recalibrations instead of identity threats. Money viewed through this lens transforms from something fragile into something dynamic. It becomes part of an ongoing process rather than a final destination. And once risk is understood this way, a deeper realization begins to emerge. The greatest financial danger is not making a wrong decision. It is allowing fear to prevent decisions altogether. Because wealth rarely belongs to those who eliminate uncertainty. It belongs to those who learn how to move intelligently within it. In the next chapter, we'll explore something rarely discussed openly, even among financially successful professionals. Why losing money feels far more painful than earning it ever feels rewarding. This emotional imbalance sits at the center of most financial behavior. Human beings do not experience gains and losses equally. Psychologically, the pain of loss is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gain. A bonus received feels good for a short period of time. A financial setback, however, can linger mentally for months or even years. This imbalance explains why intelligent professionals often behave conservatively long after they no longer need to. Early financial experiences leave deep impressions. For many people who grew up middle class, money represented stability, safety, and proof of progress. Watching parents worry about expenses or economic uncertainty created an unconscious association. Money equals security. So when wealth finally begins accumulating later in life, the fear of losing it becomes intensely personal. It is not simply about numbers declining. It feels like losing safety. This emotional attachment changes decision-making in subtle ways. Professionals who are otherwise rational begin avoiding opportunities that introduce uncertainty. Investments are delayed. Career changes are postponed. Business ideas remain unexplored. The goal quietly shifts from growth to preservation, and preservation feels responsible. But emotional protection often conflicts with financial progress. Wealthy thinkers learn to separate emotional pain from strategic reality. They acknowledge the discomfort of loss without allowing it to dictate long-term behavior. Loss becomes information rather than identity damage. This mindset develops gradually. It rarely appears naturally. Consider how different individuals respond to market volatility. When prices decline, many people interpret the event as failure. Anxiety rises. Headlines reinforce fear. Selling feels like relief because action reduces emotional tension. Yet, wealthy investors frequently behave differently. They analyze context instead of reacting immediately. They understand that volatility is not an anomaly, but a feature of participation in growth systems. Their calmness does not come from indifference. It comes from expectation. They expect fluctuation because they understand the nature of compounding. Progress rarely occurs in straight lines. Growth includes periods of uncertainty, discomfort, and temporary reversal. The emotional weight of losing money becomes lighter when loss is anticipated rather than surprising. This perspective extends beyond investing into careers and business decisions as well. Many professionals avoid transitions not because opportunities lack potential, but because the possibility of temporary regression feels intolerable. A role change might involve short-term uncertainty. Starting something new might require stepping away from established competence. Emotionally, this feels like moving backward. But wealthy thinkers evaluate trajectories rather than moments. They recognize that temporary instability can create long-term expansion. They tolerate short-term discomfort because they understand time horizons differently. Average thinking asks, how will this feel next month? Wealthy thinking asks, where could this lead in 5 years? This difference transforms risk perception entirely. There is also a deeper psychological layer involved. Losing money challenges identity. Professionals often equate financial success with personal capability. When outcomes decline, self-doubt appears quickly. Was the success real? Was it luck? Am I less capable than I thought? These questions create emotional turbulence that has little to do with objective financial reality. Wealthy individuals learn to detach identity from outcomes. They recognize that markets, industries, and economic cycles influence results beyond personal control. Competence remains separate from temporary performance. This separation preserves confidence during difficult periods. Without it, fear drives decisions aimed at restoring emotional comfort rather than building long-term wealth. Another subtle shift occurs as individuals gain experience with uncertainty. The first significant financial loss often feels overwhelming. The second feels manageable. Over time, exposure builds psychological resilience. Uncertainty becomes familiar rather than frightening. Wealthy thinkers do not avoid losses entirely. They build the emotional capacity to survive them. This resilience allows continued participation in environments where growth is possible. Because the paradox of wealth is this: avoiding every loss often prevents meaningful gain. Financial success requires exposure to systems where outcomes fluctuate. Emotional maturity lies in accepting this reality without allowing fear to dominate behavior. Money stops being something fragile that must be protected at all costs. It becomes a resource moving through cycles. And when loss loses its emotional dominance, decision-making becomes clearer, calmer, and far more strategic. The question is no longer how to avoid discomfort. The question becomes whether discomfort is serving long-term progress. We'll explore another quiet mental shift that separates wealthy decision-makers from otherwise intelligent professionals: the movement from seeking certainty to understanding probability. Most people are trained to look for correct answers. From school through corporate life, success is often defined by accuracy. Exams reward certainty. Performance reviews reward predictability. Promotions favor those who minimize visible mistakes. Over time, this conditioning shapes how professionals approach money. They wait for confirmation. They want proof before acting. They look for guarantees before committing capital. They delay decisions until risk appears minimal. The intention is logical. Acting without certainty feels irresponsible. But financial life rarely offers certainty. Markets move based on incomplete information. Businesses succeed through experimentation. Career growth requires stepping into roles before feeling fully prepared. Every meaningful financial decision exists somewhere between confidence and uncertainty. Wealthy thinkers accept this reality early. Instead of asking, "Is this guaranteed to work?" they ask, "What are the probabilities?" This difference appears small, yet it fundamentally changes behavior. Probability thinking removes the need for perfection. Decisions no longer require absolute assurance. Instead, individuals evaluate potential outcomes, weigh upside against downside, and act when the odds appear favorable over time. They understand that even good decisions sometimes lead to poor short-term results, and that does not make the decision wrong. This perspective reduces emotional attachment to immediate outcomes. A single investment loss, business setback, or career misstep does not collapse confidence because success is measured across a series of decisions rather than one event. Average thinking evaluates decisions by outcome. Wealthy thinking evaluates decisions by process. If the process is sound, temporary setbacks are tolerated as part of long-term probability. This mindset mirrors how experienced investors and entrepreneurs operate. They recognize that no individual move determines success. Progress emerges through repeated exposure to favorable opportunities. They place many small, intelligent bets rather than searching endlessly for perfect ones. Professionals unfamiliar with probability thinking often hesitate longer than necessary. They wait for conditions to feel safe, but by the time certainty appears, opportunity has usually diminished. High-growth opportunities rarely look comfortable at the beginning. They feel uncertain precisely because outcomes have not yet been proven. Wealthy thinkers train themselves to recognize this discomfort as a normal feature of opportunity rather than a warning sign. They ask different questions. What is the potential upside if this works? What is the controlled downside if it doesn't? What can I learn regardless of outcome? These questions shift focus from fear toward analysis. There is also a psychological benefit to probability-based thinking. It reduces regret. When decisions are made thoughtfully within a probabilistic framework, outcomes feel less personal. Loss becomes part of participation rather than evidence of failure. Regret often arises when people believe they should have predicted the future perfectly. Probability thinking removes this unrealistic expectation. It replaces prediction with positioning. You do not need to know exactly what will happen. You only need to position yourself where favorable outcomes are more likely over time. This approach extends beyond investing into career decisions as well. Professionals frequently remain in familiar roles, waiting for absolute clarity about next steps. Yet career advancement often requires moving before certainty exists. New responsibilities, industries, or opportunities rarely provide guarantees. Those who understand probability move earlier. They accept temporary ambiguity because they trust their ability to adapt. Adaptability becomes a form of risk management. Another subtle advantage emerges from this mindset: emotional stability. When life is viewed probabilistically, surprises feel less destabilizing. Unexpected outcomes become expected features of a complex system. Calm replaces panic, and calm thinking allows better decisions precisely when others react emotionally. Wealth over long periods tends to accumulate not from perfect timing, but from consistent exposure to intelligent probabilities. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. The goal is to make peace with it and to act wisely within it. We'll explore a distinction that quietly shapes long-term wealth outcomes, yet rarely appears in traditional financial conversations: the difference between protecting money and protecting opportunity. Most professionals believe responsible financial behavior means protecting what they already have. Save carefully. Avoid unnecessary risks. Preserve accumulated assets. These instincts are understandable. After years of effort, stability feels valuable. Financial progress represents discipline, sacrifice, and personal growth. Naturally, the desire emerges to defend that progress. But wealthy thinkers recognize that money itself is not the ultimate asset. Opportunity is. Money is simply stored optionality, the ability to make future decisions. And this shifts how risk is interpreted. Average thinking treats money as something fragile that must remain untouched. Wealthy thinking treats money as a tool that must remain useful. There is an important difference between preservation and paralysis. When professionals focus exclusively on protecting capital, they often begin rejecting opportunities that introduce temporary uncertainty. Investments feel uncomfortable. Career moves appear risky. New ventures seem unnecessary because current stability already feels sufficient. Over time, financial behavior becomes defensive rather than strategic. The individual stops positioning for growth and begins maintaining existing comfort. At first, nothing appears wrong. Income remains stable. Savings grow slowly. Life feels predictable. But the hidden cost of excessive protection appears gradually. Opportunities require participation. Markets reward engagement. Skills grow through challenge. Networks expand through movement. Innovation favors those willing to experiment. When protection becomes the primary objective, exposure to opportunity declines. Wealthy thinkers understand that protecting opportunities sometimes requires accepting controlled risk with money. They do not risk blindly. They build systems that allow experimentation without threatening survival. Emergency reserves exist. Downside scenarios are evaluated. Exposure is sized intelligently. But once safety margins are established, money is allowed to work. This mindset treats capital as dynamic rather than static. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid losing this?" wealthy individuals ask, "How can this create future options?" Money becomes fuel for learning, growth, and positioning. This philosophy appears frequently among experienced investors and entrepreneurs. They understand that unused capital slowly loses power through inflation, missed opportunities, and declining adaptability. The danger is rarely catastrophic loss. The danger is silent stagnation. There is also a psychological element involved. Protecting money feels emotionally satisfying because it reduces anxiety immediately. Taking calculated risk introduces discomfort in the present, even if it improves long-term outcomes. Human beings naturally prefer short-term emotional relief. Wealthy thinkers train themselves to prioritize long-term optionality over short-term comfort. They recognize that the purpose of wealth is not merely security, but freedom. Freedom to change direction, pursue meaningful work, or respond intelligently to unexpected opportunities. Opportunity protection requires flexibility. Flexibility requires movement, and movement requires tolerance for uncertainty. Consider how different professionals respond when presented with an opportunity outside their current expertise. One person declines immediately, citing risk and stability. Another explores cautiously, investing time or resources to understand the potential. Years later, their financial trajectories may diverge dramatically, not because one worked harder, but because one preserved opportunity while the other preserved certainty. This distinction becomes especially important during periods of economic change. New industries emerge, technologies shift markets, and unconventional paths appear. Those focused solely on protection often react too late. Wealthy thinkers remain attentive to emerging possibilities because they understand that future wealth rarely comes from past decisions alone. They protect their ability to adapt. This does not mean constant action or reckless experimentation. It means maintaining openness, keeping resources, skills, and mindset flexible enough to respond when meaningful opportunities arise. Ultimately, money achieves its highest purpose when it expands choice. Protecting money without protecting opportunity slowly narrows life. Protecting opportunity, even when uncomfortable, expands it, and over time, expansion tends to outperform preservation. We'll explore something that often appears mysterious from the outside: why financially experienced individuals tend to remain calm precisely when uncertainty feels highest for everyone else. During market downturns, economic slowdowns, or periods of professional instability, emotional reactions become highly visible. News cycles intensify fear. Conversations shift toward worst-case scenarios. Even confident professionals begin questioning decisions they felt certain about only months earlier. Panic spreads quickly because uncertainty activates one of the brain's oldest survival mechanisms. When outcomes feel unpredictable, the mind searches for immediate safety. Selling feels safer than holding. Doing nothing feels safer than acting. Following the crowd feels safer than independent thinking. These reactions are deeply human, yet wealthy thinkers often behave differently. Their calmness is not the result of superior intelligence or emotional detachment. It comes from familiarity. They have experienced uncertainty before and understand that volatility is not an exception to financial life. It is a recurring feature. Experience changes perception. Where others see chaos, experienced individuals see cycles. Economic expansions and contractions repeat. Markets rise and fall. Industries transform and stabilize again. Careers evolve through phases rather than straight lines. Because wealthy thinkers expect disruption, they do not interpret it as personal failure or permanent danger. Expectation reduces emotional shock. This psychological preparedness allows them to analyze situations more clearly, while others react emotionally. There is also a structural reason behind their calmness. Wealthy individuals often build margins of safety long before uncertainty appears. Emergency funds, diversified income sources, adaptable skills, and long-term investment horizons provide psychological stability. Preparation creates emotional resilience. When uncertainty arrives, they are not scrambling to survive. They are observing, adjusting, and sometimes even positioning themselves advantageously. Many professionals misunderstand this behavior. Calmness is often mistaken for fearlessness. In reality, it is preparation meeting experience. Wealthy thinkers acknowledge risk but refuse to let fear dictate timing. They understand that emotional decisions made during panic rarely produce optimal outcomes. When markets decline, average investors often sell to stop emotional discomfort. Wealthy investors frequently reassess fundamentals rather than reacting to headlines. They evaluate whether underlying conditions have changed or whether fear alone is driving movement. This analytical pause creates opportunity. Periods of widespread panic often coincide with moments when assets, careers, or business opportunities become undervalued. Those able to remain rational gain access to possibilities unavailable during calm periods. Calm thinking becomes a competitive advantage. Another psychological difference emerges in how time is perceived. Panic thinking focuses narrowly on the present moment. Wealthy thinking expands the timeline. Instead of asking, "What happens this week?" they ask, "How will this look 5 or 10 years from now?" Longer time horizons dilute temporary volatility. Short-term losses appear smaller when viewed within decades of compounding. This perspective allows continued participation in growth systems even when outcomes temporarily move backward. Professionals who lack this time perspective often abandon strategies prematurely. They exit investments too early, change careers impulsively, or retreat from opportunities just before conditions improve. Patience, supported by preparation, allows wealthy thinkers to endure uncertainty long enough for recovery and growth. There is also a deeper emotional shift involved. Wealthy individuals gradually detach their sense of control from external events. They accept that markets, economies, and global conditions cannot be predicted perfectly. Instead of seeking control over outcomes, they focus on controlling behavior. They manage spending, learning, positioning, and decision-making processes. Control shifts from environment to response. This internal locus of control stabilizes emotions during volatile periods. Calmness becomes less about optimism and more about discipline. Over time, this discipline compounds into confidence, not confidence that outcomes will always be positive, but confidence in one's ability to adapt regardless of outcome. And adaptability, more than prediction, becomes the foundation of durable wealth. When others panic, wealthy thinkers slow down. They observe carefully, because they understand that uncertainty does not eliminate opportunity, it simply redistributes it. We'll explore one of the most overlooked differences between average financial behavior and wealthy thinking: the way time itself is understood. Most financial stress does not come from lack of income or lack of intelligence. It comes from compressed time horizons. Professionals often evaluate decisions through short windows: quarterly performance, annual bonuses, immediate market movements, next year's salary increase. Near-term outcomes dominate attention because modern professional life rewards short-term measurement. Deadlines are immediate. Results are reviewed constantly. Feedback arrives quickly. Over time, this environment conditions the mind to expect rapid validation. When applied to money, this expectation creates tension. Investments are judged too early. Career decisions are evaluated before momentum has time to develop. Business ideas are abandoned during the uncomfortable middle phase, where progress is invisible but essential. Short-term thinking magnifies uncertainty. Wealthy individuals gradually learn to extend their time horizon. They stop asking whether decisions look successful today and begin asking whether decisions remain intelligent over long periods. Time becomes an ally rather than a source of pressure. This shift changes emotional experience dramatically. Volatility feels smaller when viewed across decades instead of months. Temporary career setbacks lose significance when understood as part of a 40-year professional journey. Financial compounding becomes visible only when patience allows it to unfold. Many professionals intellectually understand compounding, but emotionally struggle with it. Compounding requires waiting, and waiting conflicts with modern culture's demand for immediate progress. Wealthy thinkers become comfortable operating in environments where results arrive slowly but accumulate powerfully. They recognize that meaningful wealth rarely comes from single events. It emerges from consistent positioning maintained over long durations. A disciplined investor does not rely on perfect timing, but on continued participation. A successful professional does not depend on one promotion, but on cumulative skill development. Entrepreneurs rarely succeed through one breakthrough moment, but through sustained iteration. Time rewards consistency. This understanding also reshapes how risk is perceived. Short-term thinking exaggerates danger. A temporary market decline feels catastrophic when viewed through a weekly lens. But when viewed over decades, fluctuations appear as normal movement within an upward trajectory. Longer time horizons reduce emotional volatility. They allow decisions to be guided by strategy rather than reaction. Wealthy thinkers intentionally design financial systems aligned with long-term timelines. Investments are selected for durability rather than excitement. Careers are chosen for learning potential rather than immediate prestige. Decisions are evaluated based on future optionality rather than short-term comfort. This approach requires patience that often feels countercultural. The modern professional environment encourages constant optimization, switching strategies frequently, chasing new opportunities rapidly, reacting quickly to changing conditions. But excessive adjustment interrupts compounding. Wealth accumulates where stability meets intelligent adaptation. Knowing when to remain consistent becomes as important as knowing when to change direction. Another subtle benefit emerges from long-term thinking: emotional freedom. When decisions are not tied to immediate validation, anxiety decreases. Progress becomes quieter but more sustainable. Confidence grows from accumulated evidence rather than temporary outcomes. The professional no longer needs every year to feel extraordinary. Steady advancement becomes sufficient. There is also an identity shift involved. Individuals who think long-term begin viewing themselves as participants in ongoing processes rather than performers seeking instant results. Money becomes less about proving success and more about building capacity for future choice. Time transforms wealth from an urgent pursuit into strategic construction. And once this perspective settles in, uncertainty feels less threatening. Because the longer the time horizon, the more room there is for recovery, learning, and growth. Wealthy thinkers understand that time is not simply something that passes. It is the most powerful asset working quietly in their favor. Why wealthy people separate decisions from outcomes. We'll explore a mental discipline that quietly protects wealthy individuals from emotional decision-making. The ability to separate decisions from outcomes. Most people judge decisions based on what happens afterward. If an investment succeeds, the decision is labeled smart. If a career move works out, the choice feels justified. If money is lost, the decision is considered a mistake. This seems logical, but it creates a dangerous psychological trap. Outcomes are influenced by many variables beyond individual control: timing, market conditions, economic cycles, organizational changes, and sheer randomness. When success or failure becomes the sole measure of intelligence, learning becomes distorted. Professionals begin chasing good outcomes rather than making good decisions. Wealthy thinkers understand that a well-reasoned decision can still produce a poor short-term result, and a poorly reasoned decision can occasionally produce success. They focus on process. A sound process includes research, thoughtful risk assessment, understanding of probabilities, and alignment with long-term goals. Once a decision meets these criteria, the outcome becomes feedback rather than judgment. This mindset prevents emotional overreaction. Consider how many professionals abandon investment strategies after temporary losses. The discomfort of seeing negative results leads them to assume the strategy itself was flawed. They change course repeatedly, unknowingly interrupting compounding. Wealthy thinkers resist this impulse. They evaluate whether the reasoning behind the decision remains valid rather than reacting to temporary outcomes. If the underlying logic still holds, they maintain course. If new information genuinely changes conditions, they adapt thoughtfully. The distinction lies in intentional adjustment rather than emotional reaction. This discipline extends beyond finance into careers and business decisions as well. A promotion that turns out differently than expected does not automatically mean the decision was wrong. A business experiment that fails financially may still provide valuable knowledge that improves future positioning. Separating decision quality from outcome quality allows continuous learning without damaging confidence. Many professionals struggle here because personal identity becomes intertwined with results. Success feels like validation of intelligence. Failure feels like evidence of inadequacy. Wealthy thinkers gradually detach ego from outcomes. They understand that participation in complex systems guarantees variability. Financial markets, professional environments, and entrepreneurial ventures all contain elements of unpredictability. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty, but to improve decision-making over time. This perspective reduces regret. Regret often emerges when individuals believe they should have known the future. Wealthy thinkers accept that uncertainty makes perfect prediction impossible. Instead of asking, "Why didn't I foresee this?" they ask, "What can I refine next time?" Learning replaces self-criticism. Another advantage appears in emotional stability. When outcomes no longer dictate self-worth, confidence becomes more resilient. Temporary setbacks do not derail momentum. Success does not lead to overconfidence. Behavior remains consistent. Consistency allows experience to accumulate. Over long periods, individuals who prioritize decision quality naturally outperform those who react impulsively to outcomes. They remain invested during downturns, continue learning during challenges, and recognize opportunities others overlook due to emotional fatigue. Money management becomes less stressful because decisions are grounded in principles rather than moods. This separation between decision and outcome also encourages thoughtful risk-taking. When fear of being wrong decreases, professionals become more willing to explore opportunities aligned with long-term goals. They understand that intelligent risk sometimes produces short-term discomfort, but contributes to broader growth. Wealth, in many ways, is built by individuals willing to make good decisions repeatedly without demanding immediate proof that they were correct. The outcome eventually follows the process, and over time, disciplined thinking becomes more valuable than any single financial win. We'll explore a habit that often remains invisible to outsiders. Wealthy individuals do most of their risk management before risk ever becomes visible. To many professionals, financial success appears connected to bold decisions made at the right moment. Media stories often highlight dramatic investments, courageous career moves, or decisive entrepreneurial actions taken during uncertainty. But the reality is quieter. When uncertainty arrives, wealthy thinkers rarely feel forced into urgent decisions because preparation already exists beneath the surface. Preparation reduces fear. Most financial panic occurs when individuals realize they have no margin for error. When income depends on a single source, when savings are minimal, or when skills are narrowly specialized, even small disruptions feel threatening. Under those conditions, risk feels overwhelming. Wealthy thinkers approach money differently. They build buffers long before they appear necessary. Emergency reserves, diversified income streams, adaptable skills, and professional networks are developed gradually during stable periods. These actions do not produce excitement. They produce resilience. Resilience changes emotional response when uncertainty appears. Instead of reacting defensively, prepared individuals have time to think. Time allows analysis. Analysis allows intelligent action. Preparation transforms risk from crisis into decision. Many professionals misunderstand this stage because preparation often looks indistinguishable from patience. While others pursue visible progress or lifestyle upgrades, wealthy thinkers quietly strengthen foundations. They maintain liquidity even when markets feel optimistic. They continue learning even when careers feel secure. They nurture relationships even when opportunities are not immediately required. These behaviors seem conservative during good times but become powerful during challenging periods. Prepared individuals do not need perfect predictions because they possess flexibility. Flexibility becomes a form of insurance. Another important aspect of preparation involves emotional conditioning. Wealthy thinkers intentionally expose themselves to manageable uncertainty. They invest gradually, experiment with new skills, explore side opportunities, and learn how to tolerate ambiguity. This exposure builds familiarity with risk. By the time larger decisions appear, uncertainty no longer feels foreign. The mind recognizes the sensation and responds calmly rather than defensively. Professionals who avoid uncertainty entirely often experience overwhelming stress when change eventually becomes unavoidable. Without prior exposure, risk feels sudden and uncontrollable. Preparation prevents shock. There is also a strategic element involved. Wealthy individuals understand that opportunities tend to appear during periods when others feel constrained. Economic downturns, industry disruptions, and technological shifts often create openings unavailable during stable times. Those who prepared earlier can act while others hesitate. This does not mean seeking crisis. It means recognizing that uncertainty redistributes opportunity toward those with flexibility and resources. Preparation also extends to identity. Wealthy thinkers do not define themselves solely by current roles or income levels. They cultivate multiple capabilities: analytical thinking, communication, adaptability, and continuous learning. Identity becomes portable. When external conditions change, self-confidence remains intact because competence extends beyond a single environment. This psychological security reduces fear of change. Prepared individuals do not assume stability will last forever. Instead, they accept change as inevitable and design systems that allow adaptation without panic. The result is subtle but powerful. When risk appears, wealthy thinkers rarely feel surprised. They feel ready, and readiness allows them to see possibilities where others see only danger. Because in financial life, success often belongs not to those who react fastest, but to those who prepared long before reaction became necessary. We'll explore a characteristic that often looks counterintuitive from the outside. Wealthy individuals develop an unusual tolerance for temporary discomfort. Most financial decisions are not limited by intelligence or opportunity. They are limited by emotional resistance. Human beings naturally move toward comfort. Stable income feels reassuring. Familiar routines reduce anxiety. Predictable environments allow the mind to relax. After years of effort, professionals understandably want life to feel easier. But comfort has a hidden side effect. It narrows adaptation. When conditions feel stable, the motivation to evolve decreases. Skills plateau. Risk tolerance shrinks. Decisions become centered around maintaining existing circumstances rather than expanding future possibilities. Wealthy thinkers recognize that growth frequently appears disguised as discomfort. Learning new skills requires feeling inexperienced again. Changing roles introduces uncertainty. Investing during volatility feels emotionally uncomfortable. Building something new demands patience without immediate reward. Discomfort signals transition. Average thinking interprets discomfort as danger, a sign that something may be wrong. Wealthy thinking interprets discomfort as information, evidence that expansion may be occurring. This difference shapes long-term outcomes. Professionals who avoid discomfort often remain competent but constrained. Their careers stabilize, but growth slows. Financial progress continues, yet opportunities requiring temporary sacrifice are declined. Nothing collapses, but nothing accelerates either. Wealthy individuals develop a different relationship with discomfort. They learn to distinguish between harmful stress and productive tension. Harmful stress damages health and stability. Productive tension stretches capability. The ability to tolerate productive tension becomes a financial advantage. Consider career advancement. Many promotions require accepting responsibility before feeling fully prepared. New leadership roles introduce ambiguity and higher expectations. The initial period often feels uncomfortable. Those who interpret this discomfort as misalignment retreat toward familiar positions. Those who recognize discomfort as adaptation persist long enough for competence to develop. Over time, competence transforms discomfort into confidence. The same principle applies to investing and entrepreneurship. Markets fluctuate. Businesses evolve unpredictably. Early phases rarely provide emotional reassurance. Wealthy thinkers do not seek discomfort unnecessarily, but they expect it whenever growth is occurring. Expectation prevents panic. Another important shift occurs in how discomfort is evaluated across time. Temporary difficulty is weighed against long-term possibility. Short-term inconvenience becomes acceptable when aligned with broader vision. This long-term orientation reduces impulsive decision-making. Instead of reacting immediately to emotional discomfort, wealthy individuals pause and ask whether the discomfort serves future positioning. If it does, they continue. This patience compounds. There is also a psychological freedom that emerges from this mindset. When discomfort is no longer feared automatically, individuals become less constrained by external conditions. They are willing to explore unfamiliar environments, experiment with new ideas, and engage with opportunities others avoid. Opportunity often resides just beyond collective comfort zones. Those capable of remaining steady within uncertainty gain access to experiences unavailable to those seeking constant reassurance. Importantly, wealthy thinkers balance discomfort with recovery. Tolerance for challenge does not mean continuous strain. Periods of rest, reflection, and recalibration remain essential. The goal is not hardship for its own sake. The goal is growth without avoidance. Over time, this approach reshapes identity. Individuals begin seeing themselves as adaptable rather than fragile. Confidence comes not from eliminating difficulty, but from knowing they can navigate it. Money becomes less about preserving comfort and more about expanding capability. And when capability expands, financial outcomes often follow naturally. Because lasting wealth rarely comes from choosing the easiest path. It comes from staying present long enough for temporary discomfort to transform into long-term advantage. We'll explore the final psychological transition that occurs as individuals mature financially, the moment risk stops feeling like an enemy and begins functioning as a tool. For most professionals, early financial life revolves around avoidance. Avoid debt, Avoid mistakes, avoid loss, avoid uncertainty. These lessons are useful at the beginning because stability must be built before expansion becomes possible. But over time, continuing to treat risk purely as danger creates limitations. Once basic security exists, avoiding all uncertainty no longer protects wealth. Instead, it prevents evolution. Wealthy thinkers reach a stage where they no longer ask how to escape risk altogether. They ask how to use risk intelligently. This change reflects a deeper understanding of how opportunity operates. Every meaningful advancement contains uncertainty. New investments carry volatility. Leadership roles involve exposure. Entrepreneurial decisions lack guarantees. Innovation requires experimentation. Risk is not separate from progress, it is embedded within it. The difference lies in how exposure is structured. Wealthy individuals rarely place themselves in situations where a single decision determines survival. They design asymmetric risk, situations where potential upside significantly outweighs manageable downside. Loss becomes limited, possibility becomes expansive. This mindset allows engagement with opportunity without reckless behavior. Instead of avoiding uncertainty, they shape it. Professionals often misunderstand this approach because risk-taking is commonly portrayed as bold or dramatic. In reality, intelligent risk is often quiet and methodical. It involves preparation, analysis, diversification, and patience. Wealthy thinkers increase exposure gradually. They test ideas before committing fully. They learn continuously while maintaining safeguards. Risk becomes a learning mechanism. Each decision provides information. Each outcome refines judgment. If over years, accumulated experience improves intuition about which opportunities deserve attention. Confidence emerges not from certainty, but from familiarity with uncertainty. There is also an emotional transformation involved. When risk is viewed as threat, fear dominates decision-making. When risk becomes a tool, curiosity replaces fear. Individuals become interested in understanding outcomes rather than avoiding them. Curiosity encourages exploration. Exploration expands capability. Capability increases freedom. This cycle gradually changes how money is experienced. Financial decisions stop feeling defensive. Instead of protecting against loss alone, individuals position themselves for growth aligned with personal values and long-term goals. Money becomes active rather than passive. Another subtle shift occurs in identity. Wealthy thinkers no longer see themselves as victims of economic conditions. They recognize that while external events cannot be controlled, positioning within those events remains flexible. They adapt strategies rather than retreat from participation. Adaptability becomes more valuable than prediction. This perspective reduces anxiety because uncertainty no longer signals helplessness, it signals possibility. Individuals begin viewing changing environments as spaces where thoughtful action can create advantage. Over time, this mindset leads to a profound realization. Financial maturity is not achieved when risk disappears. It is achieved when uncertainty no longer prevents movement. Risk becomes part of the landscape rather than an obstacle blocking progress. And once this understanding settles in, wealth building transforms from a defensive exercise into a creative one, an ongoing process of positioning, learning, and intentional choice. We'll explore the final insight that ties everything together, the quiet confidence that emerges when money is no longer approached with fear, urgency, or constant emotional tension. By this stage, wealthy thinking no longer revolves around tactics alone. It becomes a way of interpreting the world. Most professionals spend years believing financial success will eventually remove uncertainty. They imagine a future point where income is high enough, investments are large enough, and stability is strong enough that worry disappears entirely. But experienced individuals discover something different. Uncertainty never fully disappears. Markets continue changing. Careers evolve. New decisions appear. Economic conditions shift repeatedly over a lifetime. What changes is not the external environment. What changes is the relationship with uncertainty itself. Wealthy thinkers develop calm confidence, not because outcomes become predictable, but because they trust their ability to respond intelligently regardless of circumstances. Confidence moves inward. Instead of relying on stable conditions, they rely on adaptable thinking. Instead of needing guarantees, they rely on preparation, experience, and perspective. Money stops functioning as emotional protection and becomes strategic flexibility. This shift reduces psychological tension in surprising ways. Financial decisions feel less urgent. Comparison with others loses intensity. Short-term fluctuations stop dominating attention. The mind becomes less reactive because identity is no longer tightly to financial outcomes. Wealth becomes quieter. It is reflected not only in assets, but in decision-making clarity. Individuals feel comfortable waiting, comfortable saying no, comfortable allowing opportunities to develop naturally rather than chasing validation. Patience replaces urgency. This patience often appears invisible from the outside. Wealthy individuals do not constantly announce progress. They rarely feel pressure to display success publicly. Their focus moves towards sustainability rather than recognition. Because the deeper goal of wealth is not accumulation alone, it is freedom of attention, freedom to choose meaningful work, freedom to spend time intentionally, freedom to make decisions aligned with long-term values rather than immediate necessity. Risk, once feared, becomes part of this freedom. Uncertainty no longer threatens identity. It simply becomes another variable to navigate thoughtfully. And this perspective creates emotional stability that money alone cannot provide. Many professionals spend years trying to eliminate risk before allowing themselves to feel secure. Wealthy thinkers reverse the process. They build internal security first. Through preparation, understanding, and adaptability, and external stability follows. Financial maturity ultimately looks less dramatic than most people expect. It feels calm, decisions slow down, reactions soften, thinking deepens. Money becomes integrated into life rather than dominating it. The journey moves from fear to understanding, from protection to positioning, from urgency to intentional living. And perhaps the most important realization emerges quietly at the end. Wealth is not defined by how much risk you avoid. It is defined by how confidently you can face uncertainty without losing clarity about who you are and where you are going. If this conversation gave you a new way to think about money, take a moment to reflect on how you approach risk in your own life. Most people spend years trying to change their financial outcomes without examining the thinking patterns guiding their decisions. Real change often begins there. If you find value in these deeper conversations, consider subscribing to Mindful Wealth. This channel is built for thoughtful professionals who want calm, analytical perspectives on money, psychology, and modern success without noise, hype, or shortcuts. And if someone came to mind while listening, share this episode with them, because sometimes a single idea heard at the right moment can quietly change the direction of an entire career. Until the next conversation, keep thinking long term.